Alex sat at the kitchen island, stirring his coffee long after cream had settled. The quiet hum of the city seeped through the open window, a stark contrast to the stillness inside the apartment. Across from him, Nate scrolled through his phone, already immersed in his morning emails. The air smelled of fresh espresso and the faint trace of Nate's aftershave. Clean, sharp, predictable. Alex watched him, searching for something. A spark, maybe a flicker of the passion they once had. "You're spacing out again," Nate said without looking up. Alex smirked, shaking himself out his daze. "Just thinking about..." Alex hesitated. Lying would be easier. Nothing. That wasn't true, of course. His thoughts had been spiraling since last night, when his phone had lit up a name he hadn't seen in years. Mark. He'd read it a dozen times before responding. "Hey, it's been a long time. I'm in town for a bit. Want to grab a drink?" Simple. Casual. A door cracked open, waiting to be pushed. Alex hadn't replied yet, but the message sat there, heavy in his chest. "Are we still doing that trip next month?" Nate's voice pulled him back. "Santa Barbara? You were excited about it." Excited. That was generous. "Yeah," Alex muttered. "Of course." He wasn't sure when they'd started talking like this, like business partners negotiating their next move rather than lovers. The love was still there, wasn't it? He should have felt grateful. Stability, comfort, a future. Nate was kind, reliable. He never forgot their anniversary. Always had a plan. But love should feel more than secure. Alex's phone buzzed, and before he could stop himself, he glanced at the screen. "Mark, let me know. Would love to see you." A slow heat crept up his neck. He locked the phone before Nate noticed. Mark had been his first real love. The kind that came fast and reckless, burning through every excuse and doubt. They had met in college, thrown together by accident and held together by everything that made no sense. Mark had been chaos in motion, hands in his pockets but never still, a smirk that felt like a dare. Kissing him had felt like a free fall, like surrendering to something bigger than either of them could control. Then life had happened. Choices were made. Promises kept. Mark had left, and Alex had stayed. Now, years later, Mark was back, and he wanted to see him. Nate stood, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. "I've got meetings all day, but I should be home by 7. Maybe we can go out tonight." Alex forced a smile. "Yeah, sounds good. You okay?" Nate turned, really looking at him now. Alex nodded, too quickly. "Just tired." Nate searched his face for a moment before leaning down to kiss him. It was a practice kiss, polite, familiar, a routine rather than an impulse. Then he was gone, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts. His phone buzzed again. He stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. "Alex, when and where?" The cafe was dimly lit, the kind of place where secrets felt safe. The scent of espresso mixed with warm vanilla wrapping around Alex as he stepped inside. His heart pounded harder than it should have. Then he saw him. Mark sat in the corner, stirring his drink absently, his fingers still adorned with silver rings. He looked almost the same, lean, sharp-eyed, that signature smirk playing at his lips. The past sat in that chair, waiting for him. Alex swallowed, forcing himself forward. "You still drink those ridiculous mochas?" Mark looked up, grinning. "You still judge me for them?" Their eyes met, and for a split second, it was as if no time had passed at all. Dancing on the edge, Alex slid into the seat across from him. "I almost didn't come." Mark chuckled, tilting his head. "But you did." Alex exhaled, leaning back. "Guess I was curious." Mark took a slow sip of his drink, watching him. Curiosity can be dangerous. A dangerous smile. A dangerous man. Alex knew better. He had a life, a home, a boyfriend waiting for him. And yet, here he was, across from the one person who had always made him forget what better judgment meant. "So," Mark said, setting his cup down, "tell me, are you happy?" The question landed like a punch to the gut. Alex hesitated, then shrugged. Happiness is relative. Mark's lips twitched. That bad, huh? He wasn't going to do this. He wasn't going to sit here and let Mark unravel him like a loose thread. I'm fine, Mark. I have a good life. A good man. Mark raised an eyebrow. And yet you answer my text. Alex had no response to that. A waitress passed by, setting a glass of water in front of him. He took a sip, buying himself time. But Mark didn't let him off the hook. You ever think about it? Mark asked. Alex looked up. Think about what? Mark leaned in slightly. Us. Alex's throat went dry. He could lie. He should lie. But the heat in Mark's gaze made it impossible. Sometimes, he admitted. Mark smirked, satisfied. Me too. The air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken. Mark tapped his fingers against the table. I'm staying in a place near downtown. Nothing fancy, but it's got a hell of a view. Alex exhaled, shaking his head. Mark. Mark held up a hand. Relax. I'm not asking you to run away with me. Just one drink. For old time's sake. Old times. Reckless times. The kind that left bruises and breathless laughter in their wake. Alex should say no. He knew that. Instead, he found himself saying, Okay. Mark grinned, standing. Let's go. Alex followed him out of the cafe, his heart hammering, a slow-burning ache spreading in his chest. He was already too far gone. Mark's apartment was on the top floor of an old brick building, the kind of place with too many stairs and not enough stability. The elevator creaked its way up, every lurch making Alex's pulse hammer harder. He could still turn around. He could still go home. But when Mark pushed open the door, stepping inside with that effortless confidence, Alex followed. The space was warm, lived in. A record player hummed softly in the corner, spinning some bluesy tune that curled around them like smoke. Half-packed suitcases sat against the wall, a reminder that Mark was never one to stay in one place for long. Mark tossed his keys onto the counter and turned, eyes locking on Alex's. Drink. Alex swallowed. Yeah. A distraction. An excuse. Anything to slow the inevitable. Mark poured whiskey into two mismatched glasses, sliding one to Alex before leaning against the counter. So, tell me, he said, swirling the amber liquid. What's the official reason you're here? Alex hesitated. He could dress it up in nostalgia, in casual curiosity, in anything but the truth. But Mark had always seen through him. Does there need to be a reason? Alex countered. Mark smirked. No, but I think we both know there is one. He took a slow sip, watching Alex over the rim of his glass. Alex mirrored him, the burn of whiskey doing nothing to sell the fire already building in his chest. Mark set his drink down. Come here. It wasn't a question. Alex didn't move at first. He stood there, drink in hand, heart clawing at his ribs. Every rational thought screamed at him to leave. But then Mark closed the distance between them, fingertips brushing against Alex's wrist, trailing upward in a slow, deliberate path. Alex exhaled sharply. Mark. I know, Mark murmured. Tell me to stop. Alex didn't. The next second, Mark's hands were on him, urgent, familiar, lips crashing into his, demanding. Alex responded before he could think, before guilt could wedge itself between them. Clothes hit the floor in a chaotic rhythm, a trail leading to the unmade bed. Mark's breath was hot against his skin, his hands gripping, pulling, claiming. This was wrong. This was inevitable. After, Alex lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. His body hummed, but his mind screamed. Mark propped himself up on one elbow, studying him. You're thinking too much. Alex let out a breathless, humorless laugh. Yeah, funny how that works. Mark ran a hand down his chest, lazy, possessive. Regret it yet? Alex closed his eyes. I don't know. It was a lie. He already knew. Mark pressed a slow kiss to his shoulder. You should stay. Alex stiffened. The invitation sat heavy in the air. He turned his head, meeting Mark's gaze. I can't. Mark studied him, then sighed, rolling onto his back. Right, because you have a good life. A good man. Alex swallowed hard. Yeah. Neither of them said what they both knew. If that were really true, he wouldn't be here. He sat up, reaching for his clothes. Mark didn't stop him. He simply watched, his expression unreadable. Alex hesitated at the door. He wanted to say something, anything to make sense of what they'd just done, but there was nothing. Instead, he walked out, leaving behind the only person who had ever truly made him feel alive. Alex stood in the dim glow of the apartment, the weight of the night pressing down on him. The air smelled of Nate's cologne, faint but grounding, a stark contrast to scent of Mark, still clinging to his skin. He had showered at Mark's place before leaving, scrubbed his skin raw. But some things don't wash off. The front door clicked shut behind him. "Hey!" Nate's voice drifted in from the kitchen. A warm, steady sound. "Safe." Alex forced his legs to move, stepping into the room where Nate was pouring wine into 2 glasses. "I thought we could have a quiet night in," Nate said, pushing a glass toward him. "You seemed distracted this morning." Alex reached for it, careful not to let his hands tremble. "Yeah, long day at the studio." The lie felt like a foreign object in his mouth, too big, too obvious. But Nate didn't question it. Not yet. Nate watched them as they ate, his sharp eyes assessing. He always knew when something was off. "You've been weird lately," Nate said finally, setting his fork down. "Like you're somewhere else even when you're here." Alex forced a chuckle. "I've been busy." Nate tilted his head. "Busy or hiding?" The words cut through the room, precise and deliberate. Alex's pulse skipped. "What are you talking about?" Nate leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I found that old picture of you and Mark in your desk drawer, the one you used to keep in your wallet." Alex swallowed hard. A single misstep, and the floor was gone beneath him. "It's just an old photo," he said carefully. Nate studied him, his silence louder than any accusation. "Did you see him?" Alex's breath hitched. The lie was right there, so easy to grab, but his lips stayed shoo. The answer hung between them, unspoken but understood. Nate sat back slowly, his jaw tight. "Jesus, Alex." Alex clenched his fists under the table. "It didn't mean—" "Don't." Nate snapped. "Don't insult me with that." His voice was eerily calm, but his eyes were sharp, cutting. "How long?" Alex shook his head. "It wasn't like that." Nate let out a hollow laugh. "You don't even know what it was, do you?" Alex exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. Did you love him?" Nate's voice cracked, just enough for the hurt to slip through. Alex looked away. That was enough of an answer. Nate stood, chair scraping against the floor. He walked past Alex without another word, disappearing into their bedroom. Alex sat frozen, staring at his untouched plate. A few minutes later, the sound of a suitcase zipper sliced through the silence. His stomach dropped. "Nate!" Nate reappeared, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "I can't do this. I won't be the guy who waits around, hoping you decide I'm enough." Alex stood abruptly. "You are enough." Nate's eyes flashed. "Then why did you run back to him?" Alex had no answer. Nate inhaled sharply, his expression hardening. "You don't know what you want. You never have." Alex felt his chest cave in as Nate brushed past him. A second later, the door slammed shut. Alex stood in the silence, his body numb. The walls of their apartment suddenly felt too big, too empty. He glanced at his phone. One unread message. Mark. A part of him wanted to open it, to escape into something reckless, something that didn't make him feel like he was drowning. Instead, he powered off the screen. He walked into his studio, picking up a blank canvas. Then, slowly, he started painting, messy, raw, honest. For the first time, he let himself face what he had been running from all along.